And welcome back to episode 10 of Being Everything Else. 10/3, New Blood.
New blood for the new blood god.
Yeah.
So we're talking about how to expand our group of role players available to us. How to get people who do not play role-playing games to stop not playing role-playing games. And to do so in a way that will pass good habits on to them and to build better role players for us to then subsequently abuse and destroy. So yeah, that's what we're talking about today. Welcome to the show. We talked a little bit before the break about some theoretical stuff, why we might be doing such a thing, various general tactics in doing so. And as we got near the end, we started talking a little bit about games in particular, like what games might be better or worse for doing such a thing. We've covered a little bit about why you may or may not want to use Dungeons and Dragons, or why people might be drawn to D&D as a thing. But I think that it's worth talking about some specific games. So, I mean, why does it matter? Why not just play the game that you're the most comfortable with and say, like, fuck you, learn this game?
Is that a rhetorical question, Adam?
I'm asking you, man. Why wouldn't you just do that? Why don't you just pick your favorite game that you know you're good at GMing?
Yeah.
And just make them play it. Just be like,
it's an easy thing to do, and like it can get people introduced to role playing if they've never done it before and don't know what it's about. Then that can be useful to a certain extent. But if they happen not to be really into the kind of experience that game creates, then they may say, okay, well, like I did role playing because I played Vampire the Masquerade, and I'm just not into it. When actually what they want to be playing is worldwide wrestling, right? So,
Vampire's pretty close to a wrestling simulator to begin with. So, wasn't there a wrestler? There was a wrestler named after one of the vampire clans, I think, in the 90s.
Really?
During that awkward period of like maybe vampire's gonna be a thing.
Right. Yeah.
I distinctly remember.
Yeah. So choosing the game that you know and that you're a big fan of. Like on the one hand, it lets you talk really enthusiastically about the game, about the experience, about role playing in general, which is great. But like, if your player isn't into that kind of game or isn't interested in that kind of thing, like if the person you're talking to is just not interested in fantasy but is into fantasy football, well, maybe you shouldn't play Dungeons and Dragons with them. Maybe you should look at something else, something closer to the kind of experience they get from talking sports with their friends. So yeah, choose something that your new players will like, because that keeps them engaged.
Yeah, and I think the thing too is that often people are dumb and don't know what they like. So you might introduce them with a game that feels to you like it makes sense, or it might be just a game you know how to teach really well or whatever, and they might hate it. And you have to, again, like what we were talking about before, you have to talk to them about what they did or didn't like about it. But we're talking about beforehand, like what can you ask people? What kinds of questions can you ask them to help you learn about them and what kind of game they might like to play?
Yeah. So many things in life just come down to, hey, just ask them, stupid.
Yeah.
And then this is definitely one.
Like, communicate with other human beings and you'll have a good time. Problem solved.
What kind of things do you like? What kind of stuff interests you? Like, that can help you choose a game, and it can also help you after the game. Like, what kind of stuff did you like? What kind of parts of that interested you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, like, using we talked a little bit about cultural touchstones, right? To be like, what kind of other stuff do you like? Like I could pick a few things for most of my friends that I know that they like that aren't role-playing games and be able to correlate that stuff to a role-playing game. But the other thing is like, what kind of games do your friends like? Like someone who likes gratuitous space battles is going to want a different sci-fi experience than someone who plays Eve.
Yeah.
Right? Like, ask them, like, yeah, what games do you play? And what do you like about those games? And so you can engage them on the mechanical level, too. Now, this is all operating under the assumption that you're playing with, like, people who are gamers, but I would say that there's a whole other audience of people who don't play games or don't give a shit about games in general that you could still play a role playing game with and get them to have a good time. And there are games that work really well for this, such as Fiasco.
Oh yeah.
Fiasco is the perfect game for people who have never played a game before. I mean, everybody's played games, but Fiasco isn't even a game. Fiasco, I mean, it is, but it's not a game in the sense of like engaging with a shit ton of mechanics. Like you do engage with those mechanics at the beginning, middle, and end of the game, and they do define your character's run. But it's a stealth game. It's really easy to pretend like it's an improv activity instead.
Okay, I see where you're coming from. So like, interestingly, I had proposed Fiasco in our prep material as a game that's hard for new players to jump into. And it's because Adam and I are coming at Fiasco from different angles. Whereas Adam says, if your players are not gamers, if they're not used to the mechanics behind role-playing games, play Fiasco with them, because largely it's just kind of a conversation about characters who are not ruled by the outcomes of dice rolls at all. Whereas, from my perspective, Fiasco is a game without a game master, which means that it can sometimes be harder for new players to sort of choose to jump in and
you know why we disagree
participate
on this? It's because I'm an anarchist and you're an imperialist pig, and
there
think
you go.
The GM
Absolutely.
has to be in charge.
Capitalism is the best form of government.
No, I think that that's actually an advantage for people who are not used to games, because it decentralizes the control and allows you to, because I mean, I'm sure you've had this happen. I've seen it in West Marches, where people don't say, you say, what do you do? And people don't say this, and they look at you and they're like, what am I allowed to do?
Yeah.
And in Fiasco, who do you look at for that? Fucking nobody. You're just like, yeah, I'm gonna do this.
Yep.
I think that it's a good game for people who aren't already familiar. Like, I wouldn't take someone who's like, I've played D&D a couple of times in high school, and be like, well, fuck all that, we're gonna play Fiasco. You know, you want to build on the experience they already have. But like, if I ever needed to get like my mom and my dad and like my non-gamer cousins to play with me, I would be like, let's play Fiasco. You guys like these movies, right? Because it's got the built-in cultural touchstone. And there's a bunch of other games that you can build up from there. So if they like that, but they're like, yeah, but I wanted to have more like dice stuff. I thought we rolled dice in this game. You know, you can build. Microscope is good for non-role players too, because it's a structured storytelling experience.
I feel like, well, so like, to me, the reason I feel like Fiasco could be harder for the people that I encounter more regularly is because I encounter more gamers. Well, the people I tend to encounter tend to be like core video game players who may feel less comfortable acting out as a character. And so, like, again, what kind of game is going to be good for the players you're targeting? It really depends on that person, like those people.
Well, yeah, the disadvantage with Fiasco is there's no game to hide behind. There's no character sheet. There's no like, oh shit, what do I do? Boop, look at my character sheet and check out all my cool powers. It's like, what do I do? Be creative. Come on, come up with something fun.
Yeah.
You know, so... Yeah, I mean, that's the other angle, is like, you could play 4th edition as a good intro game with pre-gens, and I mean, hell, just don't even start with 4th edition, start with one of the D&D board games, and be like, this is the mechanical part. Now we're going to play this, but we're going to play it, and you get to have a lot more freedom in what you do, and between fights, we're going to have our characters, like, talk to each other and stuff. If you want to do a funny voice, you can, but if you just want to shut up and, like, not engage in that part, that's fine too, right?
Yep. I mean, I actually think that basically any edition of Dungeons & Dragons, but especially the most recent edition, whatever that is an excellent edition to start people with role-playing with, just because so many people are already familiar with the cultural surroundings of Dungeons & Dragons. They know what elves and dwarves and, you know, halflings or hobbits are.
This is the part of the stream where we see Mike Merles walk behind your camera and just hand you a wad of pills.
Yeah.
Good job,
thanks, buddy. And the reason that I say that it's a great game to get started with is because they always put out a starter set. So, you know, like it. Can we
take a minute and talk about starter sets?
Yeah, totally.
They suck.
No, Adam, we can't talk about that.
They're just I've never seen a good one. Like, they're bad. They're all really bad.
I think, like, I started playing with like the 3rd edition starter set when I actually really started playing Dungeons & Dragons, which is why it took me so long to get good at it.
It's really terrible.
No, but like what that feels like that does for me is it makes it feel a little more like a board game. and then like instead of needing to go through a longer process of creating a character, I just have one, even though there are other problems with that. But it reduces the barrier of entry in certain key ways that can introduce people in a low friction setting.
Who are starter sets for, right? Like, who's supposed to buy that?
The one who's supposed to buy it is the game master.
Okay, and so you're supposed to learn the whole game from the starter set as the GM?
No. You misunderstand. The game master buys it, but they don't buy it for themselves. The game master buys it so that they can run it for their new players, because the game master already knows the game.
Right, so that's what I'm asking, right? Is the starter set... So why would you even need a starter set? Like, I bought the 5th edition starter, and I used the adventure, but I threw out all of the other crap because I knew that it was just going to be a pared-down version of the player's handbook anyway. I feel like... And this isn't... I'm not against the concept of a starter box or starter set or whatever being a playable thing, like a real thing. I'm just against the idea that you can build a rule set and then chop it up and be like, here's just the basic stuff. Because if your game is good enough that you can hack away all of that stuff, that's your game. Whatever's left.
Yeah, you didn't need that stuff anyway.
All that other crap, throw it away because it's just it's bogging your game down.
Well, no.
So that's what makes it frustrating for me.
Yeah, I'm just like, maybe I'm not remembering entirely, but the rules from the starter set were mostly complete, right? I mean, there were few rules that were missing from the rule book. It was really just races and classes that were added, right?
Yeah, they expanded your options, and I'm sure someone has done a much like broader examination or deeper examination of it. But for me, it's like, I think that starter sets as a concept tend to talk down to players. They're like, welcome to the baby version of the product. Or if it's a new game or a new edition of a game, they're like, here's the starter set. We're still working on the player's handbook. Like, feed the masses. Like, play this, and then I'm gonna, like I think modular games are great. I think the core rules with the shit to get added onto them is fine. I think the way that Wizards does that is good. But I just don't think that there are starter sets that do justice to, I'm a brand new GM. All my players are brand new. We bought this thing. We want to play D&D. We're gonna learn it, right?
Yeah.
So, starter sets as a product. It's funny because I didn't even think about this when we were talking about the episode, but it's totally a thing. Like, because Wizards wants you to buy it, because then you'll buy the player's handbook afterwards if you're really serious about the game, and if you're the GM, you'll buy all the other crap. But like, I don't think that they do new players justice. I think that they insult the intelligence of people who are trying to learn games. I think you can pick up the real rule book and do it like a grown-up.
Well, and I think that certainly depends on the game, right? So like another game that I would definitely recommend for new gamers is Apocalypse World, because it just tells you exactly what your options are, and many things work really well there.
This is a fun episode. I get to disagree with you constantly.
No, that's the worst.
Finish your point, and then I'll disagree.
I think it's a really great it's a great game because it's very sort of it's easy to take at face value and understand. So, for example, like all that the player needs to worry about when playing Apocalypse World is their playbook, which is like one 2-sided sheet of paper, and then the basic moves sheet. So basically, the most sheets they ever have to care about is 3 sheets. Now, there are some confusing elements in Apocalypse World. Adam, would you like to refute my points here?
So I was going to say, okay, so you clarified enough that I think that if you are an experienced GM, using Apocalypse World to teach people how to play role-playing games will probably go okay, right? Yeah. But as like a starter product, Apocalypse World, not very easy to understand. Like, if you read that book front to back, there's still like a lot of questions in your mind about how this stuff should work in play, I think.
The biggest thing for me in Apocalypse World is fighting. And it's like there's going hard, and there's acting under fire, and there's seize by force. And like those 3 things all come into play in combat scenarios, but none of them is a clear, I take a shot, right? It's that part of Apocalypse World is really strange.
It's because Apocalypse World is driven by and we're not going to talk about Apocalypse World the whole rest of the episode, but Apocalypse World is driven more by intent than we're on the surface layer, right? We're gonna just look at the surface layer. There's a massive ocean of shit under it that we could get into, but there's schools of game design that talk about setting stakes and intent versus conflict, and D&D is all about task, right? It's about I want to shoot. Did I shoot? Yes. How good? Right?
Yeah.
But Apocalypse World is, why am I shooting? What am I actually trying to accomplish with my gun?
Yeah. Because you can be shooting at somebody and that can be going hard, or it can be seizing by force,
right?
Or it
like
can be...
if I shoot at you and I'm trying to intimidate chat, I'm seizing their attention by force, or I'm going aggro on them by shooting you. So it's in some ways it can be a really good game for new players, and that all you have to do is just describe what you're doing, right? Just tell me what you're doing. And if you're okay as a GM being like, I'm going to tell you what to roll and when and what happens, and you are not going to disagree with me, then you'll be okay. But Apocalypse World has some space in it that's a little harder to navigate for new players.
Do you think maybe that someone should take a setting that players are more familiar with and take Apocalypse? No, never mind. I'm done with this.
I appreciate that.
So another thing that I think are great games to use as introductions to specific players. And of course, I am sort of approaching this from the perspective that many people who are here watching Being Everything Else are likely to be more experienced GMs than other people who are not here watching Being Everything Else.
I mean, just by default, signing on and listening to us speak makes you a better GM.
Totally, definitely.
You're grinding GM experience right now.
Good job. Mark XP every time Adam and Steven disagree. And also every time we agree. If someone is really into something, like they're really into Warhammer, and you want to start playing role-playing games with them, man, break out that Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. Do it, brother, because they're already there. They are already invested in playing that. Like when I started playing Dark Heresy, and I said, okay, guys, why do you want to play Dark Heresy? The answer they gave me was, I want to play in the Warhammer 40,000 universe. Great. That was a big focus of what I was trying to do with that game, playing that with them, is get at the Warhammer 40,000 universe.
God, and isn't that the struggle though? Like playing a game to be suboptimal just because all the hard work is done already for you, where you're just I could make my own 40K game, or I could reskin some game I like better, or I could bust my ass doing all this work, but Black Library made this kind of mediocre game that does most of that for me. I'm having that problem with Shadowrun, where I'm I could make a better Shadowrun game than this, and eventually I will. By the time we're done with Mirror Shades, Shadowrun will be the game I want it to be. But right now it's oh god, 4-hour fight. Okay, I remember this.
Yep. I think there's benefits and detriments to that, right? On the one hand, if someone really is a brand new role player and they really want to get into that one thing that they're already really interested in, then you can sort of leverage the tool that you have to get them interested in role playing, and then say, man, you know what? These combats in Dark Heresy, they're taking forever. Hey, why don't we play Apocalypse World, but in the Warhammer 40,000 universe, right? It'll be really similar. It'll feel pretty close to what you're trying to do in Dark Heresy. But it'll be a lot easier for you to work with. Or, maybe once they've had that taste, then you can start branching out and saying, hey, do you want to play a game that's, where you're a female World War II bomber pilot? Let's try some other interesting things.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be good for you as a GM anyway, right? Just try different games, because that's
definitely
high advice.
I can't speak highly enough of playing a lot of different games. I never thought about it before I started really before I started R&D. But even before R&D, I played Apocalypse World, I played Dungeon World, and I played The One Ring. And just doing that outside of playing Dungeons and Dragons just opened my mind so much.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of good games out there, and you might play games that you hate. But the point is that a new player is an opportunity for you to try, especially a game that you only have to do a one-shot of. It's a good opportunity to be I'm going to try a new thing, and let's play it. And I know you're really into the source material for this, so let's make that something we can leverage. Let's make it a strength, right?
Yep, definitely.
Yeah.
What about other non-role-playing games that you can use to like move people who are a little less comfortable with that idea in that direction?
I only play role playing games, and all the
Yeah,
other
of
games that I
course.
play that are not role playing games end up turning into them when I play
Yes,
them.
you role play as you're doing that. I
Seriously, I
had a
totally do.
surprise.
I've played board games where I'm like, oh, what would my faction do? I gotta.
Yep. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I was playing Papers, Please on a surprise stream recently, and I role played the shit out of playing Papers,
Oh
Please.
yeah, dude, because it's a good game and you can't help but get
Yep.
immersed, right?
Absolutely.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I think that there are games that do. Like, I mean, we talked about the fourth edition D&D games at Castle Ravenloft, and they're making a new one, which is really exciting. Did you see that? Have you played
No,
those? They're
no,
fucking awesome, dude.
I haven't.
So those board games are what. Next time we're at PAX together, we're gonna go to the game library thing. I'm gonna get one. We're gonna play it. They're what fourth edition uh, starter set for fourth edition should have been. They take all the mechanics of combat in D&D and just make a board game out of it with cards. And they're an awesome way to be like, you want to try Dungeons and Dragons? Let's play this game. Okay, now you know what this stuff is like. Let's move you into a broader environment, like we were talking about before. Descent is pretty much the Pathfinder like board game. It teaches you all about like lines of sight and movement across a grid and monsters and shit.
Nice.
And I think those games, or what's that? There's a, I want to say it's a Cthulhu one, but I don't think it is. Or maybe it is.
Arkham Horror?
No, Arkham Horror is terrible.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah, I know. I saw that look on your face. You're like, really?
it's not. It didn't strike me that way.
No, there's another game that I can't currently remember that's a lot like it's Cthulhu-esque, but it's like a role playing game. Like there's an opening scenario with like box text and like you have puzzles to solve, and your character is better at the puzzles if they're smarter, but they're better at combat if they have more of their like heart stat. I'm sure Chad is all over telling us what it is, but it's it's like that. There's a lot of these like games that exist in the space between board games and role playing games. So if you have board game friends, you can pull them over through those games. That can be the portal through which you draw them into your world of role playing.
And then like I found
Mansions of Madness. It was called Mansions of Madness.
Yeah.
Thank you, Grindel. You're the best.
I've found that like there are sort of more creative, more improvisational oriented like games that you can play in groups that move you towards role playing games. So Werewolf or Mafia are great games to like get you started. There's no mechanical support for like conflict resolution. It's all I am playing the role of a villager. I am playing the role of a werewolf or a witch or whatever. And I'm trying to just talk through conflict resolution with everybody else at the table. But then like there's a game called Once Upon a Time where you get like a hand of cards and you're trying to build a fairy tale towards the ending that you've chosen. And there's a game called Dixit, which is kind of like what Apples to Apples, but with like one person puts down or like one person chooses their own card and they make a sentence that describes that card. Everybody else chooses one of their cards that they think describes that sentence. It all goes in a pile, and then everybody chooses whose card they think was whose, basically. And even though it's not at all... I mean, there's very little about it that's similar to role-playing, except somehow in the mental muscles that it uses, I think, because you're trying to think creatively about the problems that are in front of you, and also you're doing that socially in a group. Somehow, like, in my experience, people who've had a good time with Dixit have also had a better time with role-playing games that I've run.
I feel like there's a continua of all games. Role-playing games are on part of it, but like there are board games that bridge the gap between the two. LARP exists in a space somewhere between role-playing and theater. And it's all about finding your attack vector, right, for a given person. Like if someone you're playing with is a theater major, don't be like, let's play a board game. Just be like, bam, Fiasco or whatever, right? If they're an artist, they like drawing, be like Quiet Year, right? Just again, and this is why the more you know about games, the better a GM you are, because there are so many games and there's so many different reasons to be playing in a given game, and that goes for basically everything that every kind of game. Like, so just play a lot of games and you'll be an awesome GM. But finding the right game for new players is a really good way to help build confidence in them that they're going to enjoy themselves. And you can work your way from things they're familiar with into role playing if they're not willing to just jump whole hog into playing whatever insane RPG that you have
totally.
on the table.
Do you have any other thoughts on like how to choose something great to introduce new role players to, Adam?
I mean, it's you're doing it for them, right? You're not doing it for you. You might be making them a gamer for you ultimately because you want to play with them, but you're doing it because you want to have fun with that person. A lot of people, and this is going to be kind of like, I mean, I get a lot of advice on this, and I think that you probably get questions too, where people are like, how can I want to teach X person, boyfriend, girlfriend, mom, dad, whatever, I want to teach them how to play role-playing games. What's a good one-on-one RPG?
Oh, yeah.
No, don't do it. It's way too intense. People don't think about it this way, but one-on-one role-playing games that's advanced mode. That's like hard mode.
It's the highest stakes possible. There's only one other person that you're paying attention to.
Yeah, and it's hard as a GM because you can't take a break, and it's hard for the player because they're on all the fucking time. And like, I don't know if you've ever had one of those episodes or campaigns where at the end of it, like you've played a bunch of sessions and you're just like, oh my god, I'm so burned out. Like,
absolutely.
Hours and hours of dedication and time.
Real confessions time, probably every episode of the West Marches, there's some point in time where I just sit there spacing out staring at the camera because I know I can get away with it because JP is like flapping his mouth at the group about something or whatever.
Yeah.
No, but like they're all talking to each other about something, and I don't need to necessarily hear the deliberations. I just need to know what the outcome is. So I can relax. I can just sort of step back. I don't need to hang on every word. I don't need to be thinking aggressively about what's just going to happen around the next bend.
Yeah.
I can take a breather, and everybody has that benefit at a table that's full. Whereas when it's just you and one other person, neither of you get that break.
Yeah, and you can do it I think you can do it if you have a game that supports it and both players are bought in and you acknowledge at the beginning, like, this is going to be more intense than just playing, like a group game because you can't take a break. You got to be on. We're here to entertain each other. Are there any
games that are designed explicitly for that, Adam?
Yes. Yes, there is. Yeah. I can never remember the name of it. It's Scarlet Heroes, I think. Yeah, Scarlet Heroes is designed explicitly for it. I can't speak to it because I haven't played it, but one would hope that the designer was able to achieve their goal.
Awesome.
Yeah, but
well, should we get some questions here?
Yeah. Let's take it over to the orc horde that has assembled for us.
So, chat, feel free to drop a question in. We'll be answering questions today based on how to GM for new players. So, try to keep your questions along those lines of questioning. Try not to spam your questions because we try to pull them out of chat and paste them into our Google Docs so we can come back to them later because, chat flies when people are asking lots of questions. But if you have any questions about what we've been talking about so far, you should definitely drop them in chat.
And then I love this part, the quiet period where we allow the flow to go to chat and then we wait for
JP is stoking the flames.
Questions. Let's go. Do it. I got one. I'll start with this one. So, okay. I am the God Complex asks, what do you think about running modules for new players?
Yeah.
It's a great idea. I think that modules take a lot of the pressure off for you as a GM. If you read the module, don't be insane and think you can just jump in and do it unread. But if you read the module, it's definitely going to help you fill in those gaps. So, plus also a lot of people have, if they're passingly familiar with D&D, they have an idea of like, there's an adventure and the GM's going to read us stuff and we're going to engage with that. So it's playing into their expectation already. So that's a thing. It's totally a helpful way that you can engage with new players. That is my thought on those. Have you? I mean, you've run adventures before, right, Steven? You did.
Only a few. I did the starter set.
The starter set
for this. I did Death Frost Doom. I did like a couple, but it's never been a big thing that I've done. I enjoy them. I never find that they work perfectly, right? Like you will have to rely on your GMing expertise to get you through it, no matter what.
Yeah.
But like it can be very liberating. Let's see. I'm just like grabbing a bunch of stuff from the chat.
I have another one if I can get anecdotal. If you want to keep playing chat secretary.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so I didn't catch who asked this. Klondike91 asked, how do you deal with players who are having trouble engaging in the act of role-playing? No, that's the next question. How do you best manage when players fail? And you're fast on this.
Yeah.
How do you best manage when new players fail in their attempt to achieve a goal without discouraging them? So I'll tell a quick story. So remember before, Stephen, I was telling you that I in Dungeons & Dragons, I once killed both a character and a relationship in the same role.
Yeah.
So we had a player who hadn't played D&D before, had lots of experience with MMOs, and didn't quite understand the ramifications of losing all your hit points. Mm-hmm. So there was a point at which, she said, okay, I'm gonna run into combat. And everyone's like, you have 1 hit point, and your death saves are all burned up, and if you get hit, you will die. And she's like, that's fine. I'll be fine. And she ran in, and her boyfriend was like, no, do not do this. This is insane. You're going to die. I can't believe you're doing this. She ran in. Of course, she died. Permanent death. And then I was like, okay, so you died. You got to make a new character. And her response was like, what do you mean new character? Like, can I just come back to life? And I was like, well, I mean, no, you can't. Yep. And subsequently, she was not at the next session, nor in the relationship with the person who brought her to the game.
Oh man!
It triggered.
That was what did it.
That triggered a pretty significant fight after the session, and that was. Oh, no. I mean, that wasn't 100% of it, but they agreed to terminate their relationship.
No strong relationship is going to die because of that, but I can see how that might have contributed.
So to go back to the point, right, when players fail at their attempt to achieve a goal, the best way you can do it is to try as hard as you can to establish the stakes of the things that they're doing. To be like, if you do this and you fail, this will happen. Also, play games where failure isn't just like, you rolled, you failed, blip, those are for you. Right? Like, that's just how it goes. So, play games that when you fail, it moves you forward and you can keep doing things. Otherwise, you're going to run into games that are just blocking you, and nobody wants that. So,
man, we got so many great questions. I have a duo that I want to take on here, and it's very, very in line with our topic for today. Misanthrope TV asks, how do you deal with players who are having trouble engaging in the act of role-playing but who clearly want to play? And Captonia asks, how do you encourage new nervous players to start playing roles? And like we touched on this just a little bit earlier in the session, but like one of the biggest things that I don't think we really made explicit earlier is you can just set the example that they're following. That's one of the easiest and nicest ways that I think a GM can show people at the table how they can act. If as a GM they come across somebody and you say, oh, he's a big dopey looking guy, he's clearly he was pretty strong earlier, but he's got a lot of flab, and he says, oh, hi, it's nice to meet you. Would you like to come inside and have a pot of coffee? Then, like, they immediately, they'll laugh, they'll think it's funny, they'll think you're stupid, but they'll be like, oh, that's
a thing I can do.
That's something that's okay. Yeah, you're allowed to do that.
And then what happens if you keep doing that? Eventually you'll end up with DJ Wheat, where every character has an insane accent.
Yeah.
You've dug your own grave, and now you have to lie in it.
Yeah.
Leading by example is huge. You can play a game that rewards players for engaging in their character. Torchbearer does this. Mouseguard does it. You can hack a game to encourage it. Like, in-character rewards are kick-ass, and they're a way to say, this is what my game is about. And if your game is about role-playing and doing silly voices, reward the players character-wise for that.
Yeah.
You can't really reward your players. You can give them a cookie, I guess, but
Yeah, definitely. And then we mentioned it earlier, but I think one of the best tools in your arsenal for engaging new players is the question, "What do you do?" And putting a clear threat in front of them, and then saying to that one player, Adam, what do you do? And use their character names. Say Grigori, what do you do, instead of Adam, what do you do? And then there's something that switches in their brain where, because you said Grigori and you're looking at them and you say, what do you do? They have to respond to you because you asked them a direct question. And the you that you're addressing with what do you do is their character. So immediately they're thinking, I am Grigori. What do I do? Like, how do I manage this?
Yeah, and I think you're going to notice right away, like, people will pick up on the language. I almost never have the, like, third person, first person, like, talk where I'm like, you can describe what your character does, you can describe you doing it, and we'll imagine you're your character. But people pick it up and do it. Like, everybody kind of has their own preferred style, but as a GM, I always first person everybody. I'm always like, what I don't say Dodger, what are you doing? I say Breakdown, what are you doing? Because I think that it, like you said, I think that it engages them in a way that encourages role playing. You're going to speak from your character's point of view.
There's another interesting question that I just pasted in that I want to just briefly touch on. Jason Zje.
That's a great name. J.
Yeah. He asks, or she asks, as a GM, how do you teach, quote unquote, players to stop metagaming? And the reason that I chose this question to answer is because I have a controversial answer. You don't.
Yeah, dude, that's my answer. That's my answer too. Watch me play West Marches. I metagame the shit out of that.
Yep.
Because it's a fucking game.
Yep.
They're using the mechanics. Don't be like, hey, don't make smart mechanical decisions.
Yeah.
I mean, you wanna encourage players to think outside of the mechanics, to think about engaging them by way of their character, but like, don't be like, why are you using your longsword? And they're like, because it does more damage than my short sword. And you should be like, well, thematically, your people are from the southern reaches and they use short swords, so you should be using your short. Like, fuck you, don't do that.
Unless the game actually supports something like that, and there are games that do, right? But like, I've talked about this a couple times. There's multiple levels going on in a role-playing game. There's the knowledge that we have as players. So when I say, okay, you're walking across a field and a dragon lands in front of you, like, it's not metagaming for your players to just straight up turn tail and run, right? Because, like, in popular culture, these new players who have never seen a dragon stat block before, like, they are gonna run because they know. But then, like, you might come into a different situation where it's like, okay, a red dragon lands in front of you, what do you do? And someone's like, quick, everybody get out all your ice gear. And you're like, how do you know that red dragons are vulnerable to ice? You don't. You're as a player, you know that because you played a lot of Dungeons and Dragons. Here's the thing, guys. When that player has played a lot of Dungeons and Dragons and they're interfacing with the game in a way where they can rely on their experience from playing a lot of Dungeons and Dragons, that's fun for them. That's cool for them. I really don't mind when people metagame my games because it's just another way of playing.
Yeah, the problem is that a lot of people think that system is the enemy, and that if you're a real role player, the only thing you do is make in-character decisions, but that gets you killed, and in a lot of games gets you suboptimal bullshit game experience, right? Yeah. It's still a game, you're still supposed to be good at it, and you don't want to punish someone for being good at a game. Like, honestly, for me, it's like I would ask the character. I'd be like, well, how did you know about red dragons, right? Like, how did your character know that? I know how you know it because you've read the monster manual, but how does your character know this? Like, what can that inform us about play?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, do you want to choose another question here, Adam?
Yeah, I would love to. So, Taito Man has all the powers of a Taito. How do you break through to players who had a bad experience with RPGs? That is a tough one. They got RPG trauma. I feel like for me, it's a case of being encouraging, like inversely encouraging, and like asking, like, what didn't you like about it, and like, why do you want to try again? What can we do to help you move away from that particular problem? Again, like so many of these things, it's just about asking them, acknowledging that, not every GM is the same, and problems happen, bad play occurs, and deal with the problem specifically, right? If their problem is like, my last GM was a sexist douche who just kept hitting on me, Don't do that, right? Or
there
if the
you
problem,
know.
yeah, or if the problem was like the last game that we played, it was really boring because there were so many mechanics. Be like, what game was that? Let's play something different, right? Like, people don't generally have problems with role playing in general. They have problems with specific experiences inside games.
Yeah, I mean, like,
That's my thought.
the only thing I would add on to that is that sometimes you just can't. Like, sometimes someone had a bad experience and they're just never going to come around on it, and that's okay. Like,
Yeah.
you love this thing, and that's great, and we love this also, but not everybody's gonna. And just because that good friend of yours doesn't love it doesn't make what you love any worse. It's okay.
Yeah, I mean, or you could do what I do, and if they don't like role playing games, they don't get to be your friend.
Yeah, you just cut them out of your life.
Cast them into the flame. Yeah.
Yeah.
No. If they don't like RPGs, then just don't hang out with them. Get new friends.
Here's another interesting question that I'm going to interpret. Archaitas asks, question, as a DM or GM, is there anything you would do to help someone transition from playing standard characters to hybrid class characters if they wanted to? And that's like a really specific question, and I think it's very specific to Dungeons & Dragons, but you can interpret it in a more general way as saying, as a GM, is there anything you would do to help someone transition from a surface understanding of the game part of the role-playing game to a deeper level understanding of the game part of the role-playing game? And that's a good question. Like, we talked a little bit before about different player types and how there are some players that interface more with the role-playing side of things and some people who interface more with the game-playing side of things. And you're not necessarily going to be able to move people from one camp into the other, but if this person is already interested and they're sort of saying, man, like, I wish I could do more damage. I wish I knew more about, like, how to choose skills or feats or something so that my character could really start doing a lot more damage. Like, you can sit down with them and go over some of the options, or you could even say, like, okay, well, I don't know that much because I'm not a power gamer like that, but you should definitely look at, like, the Order of the Styx forums where they have lots of class-related forums and they talk about how to make specific builds with specific magic items that really focus on certain aspects of characters, something like that. Or you can sort of support them in their attempts to make their character into the mechanical powerhouse that they want that character to be. Like, one of the recommendations I read in 4th edition, and I think it's in 5th edition also, of Dungeons & Dragons, is get a wish list from your player characters of what magic items they'd really love to find. And some players will do that because they really like the power that those magic items give them, and some players will choose magic items for other more different reasons. But if you open up that question to someone who's already sort of looking to move in a way of deeper mechanical understanding of the game, they might use that as an excuse to open the rule books and really start looking and saying, man, the GM wants to give me what I want. What actually do I want? Let me look into this. What do you think, Adam? Oh, you're muted. Sorry, buddy.
Oh, thank you.
Yep.
That's the thing, right? Is the players giving you signals, either direct or indirect, about what they want in the game. That's a good thing. It's not like for me, there's some small Grognardian part of me that if the players were like, here's a list of magic items we would like, I would take it and light it on fire and be like, I'm not fucking Santa Claus.
You're only have to do it if you want to ask.
So you're gonna get what I give you.
Yep.
So you don't want a +2 trident? Well, that's too damn bad.
That's the philosophy for the West Marches. I do not ask my players for a magic item wish list there.
Stephen, I would like a magical cure for leprosy, please.
Yeah, I bet you would.
You power-hungry maniac. All right, so I got a question here from Kaiser Prime, greatest of all Kaisers.
This is a good one.
How do you get new players to learn the rules? West Marches has a high turnover of new folks that all seem pretty clueless about rule specifics. Yes. Oh,
Yep.
God, I have struggled with this for like ever, basically, because I'm the kind of GM that loves reading the rules and is like so all over knowing every nuance of the system. And then when a player, after like 2 years of a campaign, is still like, what do I roll to hit with again? What's my THAC0? I'm like, Trident. Now you are dead. Give me a new player.
+2 trident to the face.
It's just the worst. But I've also come to realize that some people don't give a fuck about the rules, right? They're just there to hang out and play games, and if they can ask someone else what the rule is, then they will, because they don't need to learn it, because they don't think about your game except when they're at it. So for me, what I do is I offload that shit. I say, you know what? Don't ask me this anymore. Write it down or ask the person sitting next to you who knows the rules better than you. Seat them, tell them like you're going to move from the seat you're in and you're going to go sit next to the person who knows the game as like better than anyone else, and they will help you do this because you're a GM, you get shit to do. There's a lot going on and you don't want to just be like, it's agility. It's you fucking roll, you use agility to roll every goddamn time. You keep asking me this. Sorry.
Yep. So like specifically on the West Marches, this is something I see in chat from like viewers who are watching the West Marches, because like over the 10 episodes of the West Marches, did you guys know this? We've had, I think the current count, and JP can maybe correct me in chat if I'm wrong, I think the current count for total number of people involved in the West Marches over 10 episodes is 23. 23 people have played in the West Marches. That's insane. When I started the West Marches, I never thought we'd go to 23. I thought we'd be like 10, 11, 12, whatever, maybe it'd be fine. But like, we see new players who are playing for the first time or who are playing for the second time 6 weeks later who, you know, like they just, like Adam said, they don't think about the game until they're at the game. And they just, because they're new, they don't know. And so to us, it's really annoying. And to me as a GM, I'm like, how many times are these people going to ask me what they roll to hit? It's right there on the character sheet. But every time I take a little inner breath and I say, oh, it's at the bottom center of your character sheet. It'll say the weapon and then the attack bonus. You roll a d20 plus that. Now, there are things you can do, right? So like if you're in person and you've made the character sheet with them, that helps a lot. But if they're using a pre-gen character sheet or if you made it for them, they don't have that experience of going through it to learn that way. I think one of the things that I'm going to do, what I have done in the past is I've put shortcut, like shorthand information about common roles in a handout in Roll20 that my players can look at to remind themselves if they need to. I think what I'm also going to do is I'm going to start everybody on a screen in Roll20 that is a JPEG of the character sheet with important areas highlighted. And I'll be like, in red, attack rolls, and I'll just highlight the boxes where that information is found. And then saving throws and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, sitting down with the sheet again and like looking at it and being like, when I say these things, when I say attack roll, this is what I mean.
Yeah.
And it's all part of teaching the rules. But you don't teach the rules as they're written in the book. You teach them as the player is going to use them at the table. But for me, like, a big thing that I found helpful, especially if you've watched Mirror Shades at all, is if you're playing online, using Roll20, fucking make macros for that shit. So that I can be like, instead of being like, okay, you just got shot. I need your body, your dermal armor, your dodge pool, blah, 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 blah. Here's a million things. I can just say, click the resist damage macro, and the game will prompt you for these things.
Nice.
There's all kinds of fun stuff you can do with Roll20 to make that job easier. Honestly, how do I get the players to learn the rules? You can't. Like, you can't do it. They'll engage as much as they want to engage. You can ask nicely, but some of them will just never learn, and that's how it goes. You just have to try to make it easier for yourself to GM for those people.
Totally. Man, there's like a couple of interesting questions about like managing campaigns with new characters, and maybe we can just like grab a bunch of them and lump them together. So like, just to kick this off, Saxius07 asks, how would you handle a new player who wants to play an evil character in what is supposed to be a good campaign? And then Ronin55 asks, how do you get new players to take ownership of the story? Is it okay to lead them on a little bit in the beginning? And then very similarly, Xhold asks, how do I hint my players onto the path of the story I've written without railroading them hard? So like, you know, if player wants to play an evil character in what's supposed to be a good campaign, you know, maybe, I mean, that's hard. Like, I guess talk to them about what they're actually trying to get out of it. Like, why do they want to be evil? And is there a way for them to get the kind of behavior they want while still being good? Or like, at least aligning their goals with the goals of the rest of the group? I actually had a conversation with this about one of the players who played in a recent episode of the West Marches who wanted to play an evil character. And I was like, okay, you know, like, it sounds like you want to do these sorts of things. We can build you a character that is good at doing those sorts of things, but remember, the entire reason you're adventuring with the people you're adventuring with is because you want to achieve something that you can't achieve without them. So just build that into your core idea of the character. And this person seemed to sort of think about it for a second, internalize it, and say, okay, yeah, I get it. So you can just sort of talk to them a little bit about it like that. And I think...
Don't be scared to say no.
Yeah,
right?
everybody wants to have fun, and they understand that everybody else wants to have fun too.
If what they want is to make a character that's just going to be disruptive and pointless and frustrating, just say no. Just be like, nope, sorry, this character, like, let's try to rebuild the character in a way that's less totally destructive to the other players.
And if they didn't ask you if they can build a character that's annoying and frustrating and irritating, you can just one-shot them with giant wolves.
Yeah, if they just come wandering into the game and ruin everyone else's fun, yeah, you kill them.
Mm-hmm.
It's fine.
And then, like, how do you get players to take ownership of the story? How do you nudge them onto the path of the story you've written without railroading them? Like, these things are kind of very similar, I think. How do you get new players to take ownership of the story? I would say give them ownership of the story. Allow them... one of my big philosophies on running role-playing games is give players the full benefit of their successes and the full benefit of their failures. And letting them fail properly almost reinforces their ability to succeed properly. I don't know. What do you think, Adam? How do you get players to take ownership? How do you get them, on the path of interesting stuff without forcing them on it?
People buy into the things that they made up, right? Like, I like West Marches for lots of reasons, but I like the fact that when I made Grigori, I looked at the wiki, I was like, yeah, some of this stuff is interesting, some of it's not, and I was like, I'm going to make a character, and while I tell you about my character, I'm also going to tell you about all this other stuff that exists as a result of my character existing, right? I was like, sure, you have this pantheon of gods and stuff, and they're kind of cool, but I want to worship different gods that don't exist, and the fact that you're okay with that, and you weren't just like, no, you have to worship this guy, that gives me a way to engage with the setting that I wouldn't have otherwise, and I think that being open-minded about that is important. Being able to say, yep, you can buy in at whatever level you want, but also to that previous question, if I had said like, okay, cool, we're gonna play D&D, I want to be a spaceman from the blue planet, and I want to have 8 arms, and I want to be able to use psychic powers, and also I made up this class. I'm gonna be this guy. You probably would have been like, get out of here. Well, you wouldn't do that. I would do that. You would have done it a lot nicer.
I'd have been like, Adam, why don't we see if we can realign your expectations of the character?
Yeah.
Well, as long as, as a GM, I always feel like if my players are making a good faith effort to create a character that's interesting to them and is within a broad interpretation of the setting, then I'm interested in finding a way for that to work. So, Valisilwen, Margaret Crone's character for the West Marches, came from a place called the Erland Empire. I think that was her character. And that was not a place that I had in my world. But she proposed it to me. She wanted to come from this desert kingdom and be traveling a long time to get to where she was. She was very invested in that. So I just said, yeah, absolutely. It was easy enough because it didn't affect the early sessions that I had to plan. But who knows? Like with Kellen and his father and his relationship with his parents, he was early on. He was like, yeah, maybe I have my parents are missing and I'm trying to look for them. And I was like, okay, yeah, sure. For the first session or two that Kellen was around, I didn't even think about it. And then as we kept playing, as Kellen kept being around, all of a sudden it was like, wow, I want to hear more about this. Let's put in a scene where we get to find out more about Kellen's relationship with his parents. And all of a sudden that becomes this really engaging and growing part of the campaign.
Yeah, I mean, players are going to rise to the challenge that you give them, and if they don't, then someone else might, or whatever. You got to just find the room that your new players are excited about engaging in.
Yep. Cool. I think we're actually over time, so,
I think so.
Many thanks to JP for putting up with our gentle ribbing today. And thank you all for hanging out with us and chatting about how to run role-playing games for total noobs. And thank you for all of your questions. Adam, do you want to make a Q&A?
Yeah, I will. So yeah, if we didn't answer your question, or you have an additional question, or you were watching this on YouTube, just jump over to JP's subreddit, itmeJP, and we'll have a thread there.
Yeah. So
Should we shout it
thanks,
out?
guys. Bye. See you next time. You all rule. Wait, we should shout out. Yeah.
Yeah, come on.
So Adam, who are you? What do you do?
Well, if you don't already know, I'm Adam Koebel. I'm the co-author of a little role-playing game called Dungeon World. I'm streaming at...
Bye now.
Bye now. There's the URL. Go get it. I'm streaming all kinds of stuff now over at twitch.tv/Adam Koebel. I'm going to be doing more and more of that. Roleplay and other content. And if you follow me on Twitter, I would be very happy, and you would get all kinds of fun content from me. So at skinnyghost over on Twitter. Also, soon, bloody soon, we'll get to play Swan Song again. So right here on itmeJP, keep tuned in. Check out the schedule, because live roleplay action with me and Lumpy Lumpkins very soon.
Prosper Lumpkins. Yeah, so who am I? What do I do? I am Stephen Lumpkin. I'm the lead level designer for a game called Warhammer 40,000 Eternal Crusade. So if you like massively multiplayer online third-person shooters, you should definitely check that out. I do role-playing right here on twitch.tv/itmeJP, where I run the West Marches and I play in Swan Song. So the West Marches will be tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and Swan Song... hang on, looking at the schedule, itmeJP. Yeah, it's confirmed as being next Tuesday, the 24th at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So I hope I will see you in both of those places. You can follow me at Silent Osiris on Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube. I'm not as active on Twitch or YouTube anymore, but that might start rolling up again. We'll see. So that's who I am. That's what I do. That's all I have to say. Thanks, y'all, for coming out and watching us talk about games.
Yeah, see you again soon.
You bet. Laters.
Later, everybody.